edition of Wealthy Being Live. I am your host, TMR Woodford, and I am here today with my co-host, the
And
amazing Aneem Away.
everyone, it's been a while.
It has been away. I said away.
It's a joke, y'all.
And it's Yahweh. It's
Yeah,
Yahweh like Yahweh, right?
yeah.
Okay, I heard the mental correction when I said it. Okay,
All
Aneem Yahweh. Yes, Aneem is a licensed mental health therapist.
good. Yes.
This isn't our first time doing this, but it's been a couple of years. A lot's changed since then. Aneem, how you doing?
I am great. I am just balancing a lot of different things and getting to do clinical work outside of the one-to-one space, bringing that to like corporations, creating card decks, shameless plug for my fellow therapists who feel stuck. And I get to just do a lot of cool things with my therapist background. And happy social work month to all the social workers out there. It's March.
Hey, happy social work month in this month. There's a few other things, isn't it? Like Women's Month, Women's
It
History.
is Women's History Month. So shout out to all the women out there, the women who paved the way for me to be in this position today. I always think about like Harriet Tubman and like all the like when you really think about everything she's done, like back and forth from the South to Canada to free people, like that just blows my mind. So I'm eternally grateful for her and women like her.
Yes, and all of the women for paving the way, including you, Mama.
Yes,
Right,
that's
I
right.
came for you. All right. So today we actually have an interesting topic that we're going to be discussing: the loneliness epidemic. Ooh, that's a tough one.
It's scary.
So people seem more connected than ever online, but at the same time, loneliness is being called an epidemic. How do those two things exist at the same time, Annie?
Yeah, I think what happened, or rather how this exists at the same time, is that what we're seeing is a rise in number of people obviously reporting that they feel lonely, right? And so I think in order for something to quantify or qualify as a pandemic, we have to see an increase of numbers heading in a certain direction or a trend rather. And so that's what quantifies it to be a pandemic. And while we're all like connected up, or at least it appears online, people aren't building real relationships. People are building parasocial relationships. And I don't know that that necessarily constitutes as a real relationship. And I think people are really missing the human aspect, touch, connection, all these elements that go into a relationship or connection. And then, so I think that's how we're seeing these two things happening at the same time, right? And so it's concerning.
It is very concerning, and you hit it right on the head. We are what I call surface dwellers as a whole, in the respect of how deep we take our relationships. What is the depth at which we are taking our relationships? Are we getting to know one another? Are we communicating? And it's not just with new relationships, it's with the relationships that we already have,
Yes.
you know? And part of that has to be influenced by how much time we have, or how much or how focused are we on the things that matter most, and how many things are eating up our attention and taking off time for building relationships that really shouldn't have our attention at all.
Yeah. I mean, and to take it a step further, I'm going to say, like, actually, during the pandemic is when we really started to see this shift, where obviously we were forced into sort of isolation in many of ways for public health reasons. But I think this is where people started to really struggle, or at least be really open with themselves in terms of struggling with being alone and being with themselves. And so like a lot of people were looking for connection or looking to connect with people, and they couldn't do it, right? They couldn't go outside. We were quarantined. You had to stay 50 feet away from people. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but all these things played into what we're seeing today. And I think what also happens, to get another step further, is that men and women, we're calling it the women's loneliness epidemic, or we're calling it the male loneliness epidemic, where it's all of us are struggling, right? And until we can kind of get together, as a community, I think we're going to continue to struggle.
Yeah, well, you hit a bunch of nails right on the head. And so, but the question is, how did we get here? I know the pandemic did have something to do with it. I
Yeah.
think a lot of us got used to being alone. A lot of us begin to use social media as the main way of socializing. A lot of families became even more distant during that time. It was more about individual households, less about group related activities, less about being in the group. And that's also when we saw an insurgence come back. That's when we also saw an insurgence of live streaming,
Yeah.
where people were finding their communities online. And a lot of people never stepped back from that.
Yeah.
A lot of people never came back outside. So, according to the US Surgeon General, about half of American adults experience loneliness. Okay, so that's not a fringe issue, it's a cultural issue, right? And one third of Americans feel lonely every week. That
Wow.
means 30% of adults say they feel lonely at least once every week. Okay. So is it a mental issue? Is it a social physical issue? What's your take on that?
Ooh, I think can it be a combination of both, right? Because I think from a mental health perspective, especially when you think about particular mental health diagnoses like depression, major depression, there is a overwhelming sensation of loneliness that comes with that diagnosis, and oftentimes people who are struggling with mental, particularly major depression, they often isolate themselves. They feel like they're a burden on people. They feel like they're just their energy isn't doesn't allow them to be around other people. And so I think there's a mental health element that can certainly explain for that. But I think it's also a social and a community issue, right? Because as you highlighted on, people turn to streaming, people turn to social media to build communities, and that's not really sustainable, right? And so when you are like in your room, it's 12 o'clock in the morning, or and you can only turn to your phone, that doesn't really fill that sort of relationship aspect that we all need as human beings. And also, what I'm seeing is there's this shift in community just in general. And I think you alluded to it, but we have to pay to be in certain spaces. There's no more like third spaces. This idea like we can all convene freely into one central place and have a good time and connect with people, to love on people, celebrate people. And few of those places exist, especially in this capitalistic society that we live in. And so when we're eroding all these things, we erode, or we really sort of impact people's mental health, right? And their ability to function in this sort of society, because we don't have a chance or opportunity to build community outside of online. And also, I think like people don't have social skills, or we're losing the art of social skills, right? People don't know how to be in spaces with people in real time because we're so used to interacting online or being in people's streams or being in people's lives. So it's so complicated, as you can probably tell, but I think there are a number of things that are impacting our ability to build community, which I think at the very latest, it that is the quintessential part of being a human being, is connecting with other people, and we're losing that ability to connect with people.
Yeah, ooh, this topic right here. Okay. So with that said, then what would be some signs you think that someone is experiencing deep loneliness, even if they seem fine?
Yeah, I think in terms of people, signs that somebody might be experiencing deep loneliness, obviously is like withdrawal, right? Social withdrawal is usually like a red flag in some sense, not all the time, because sometimes people just, they have a fine balance. But I think social withdrawing is sort of a big sign, especially if you're somebody that was like the life of the party. I will always say you were that person, the connector, the socializer, you were all these things, and suddenly that sort of shifted. I think that's a big red flag or indicator. Also, I think I, these faceless pages that be online, those people who talk all that crap behind all these fake pages, those people, and I don't have the science to back it just yet. If I ever went and got his PhD, I would study those people. But those people, for me, are the quintessential people that are struggling and don't know how to say it and don't know how to speak up. So they come online, they're nasty, they're rude, they're hateful, they're spreading all this drama. Like those are the quintessential people that I think are struggling online and just don't know how to say it. So if you're out there with a fake page, just get some help.
Ooh, you're hitting it all on the head right there. Now, the fake pages is interesting.
Yeah. Oh.
Someone hides behind a page just to make those comments. I'm not gonna lie, I've thought about it before. You know,
And ask yourself, why did you get to that point where well, I'm not above it, because when I was younger and like I had an ex cheating on me and I had to do my detective work, I get it, but I wasn't talking shit on their pages, right? I was just
yeah.
trying to connect pieces. But like, you got to ask yourself, what drives you to that point?
Well, I just wanted to have some fun and say some funny stuff on people's pages that I knew without them knowing it was me. I wanted to mess with them a little bit.
That works too, right? I think we all have different motivating factors, but like I always say, like even if I can tell like you're miserable online, then you are struggling. Like if it comes across online, you're really struggling.
Oh, we have someone that said, especially with our youth, they have poor social skills. That's right. So we can see comments
Oh,
that are coming through right now
hey,
from
Nika.
YouTube and LinkedIn. I'm not sure if that's YouTube or LinkedIn, but Nika B, exactly. Especially with the youth, there are poor social skills. But you have to think
Yeah.
the youth are the ones that have been in this social media, virtual, communal norm the
Oh yeah.
longest.
They were born into it.
Yeah, so that's really all they know.
Yeah.
Nika says some people who are busy can also be extremely lonely, but their busyness hides their loneliness.
Oh, absolutely, girl. Absolutely. I think we're what Hey girl, I think what one of the things that we have conversations about is like high function depression, high function anxiety. This idea like this person is probably keeping themselves super busy, but internally is really struggling, and that could be a way for them to mask, right? Because maybe the reality is we have a lot of responsibilities, we're pulled in a lot of different directions, and some of us don't have the sort of liberty, if you will, to slow down, to stop, and so like we have to put on this facade all the time. We got to keep going. We got to keep ourselves busy because that's the only way we know how to operate. It also could be a trauma response, even though I don't always love when people suggest that, but like sometimes it is the case, right? Because they grew up in families. I'm just giving this example, right? From a psychodynamic perspective, maybe they grew up in a family dynamic where their only value and worth was by how much work they did, how good their grades were, how like many activities they were maintaining. And so in a lot of ways, that's the only way they know how to operate, right? From that sort of trauma perspective. And so there's a lot of possibilities here. The point is like people are struggling out there, and so like these conversations are necessary at the very least.
Yeah, they are. And, it was interesting. Growing up, I was raised as an only child, and I had no choice but to get used to being alone. So when the pandemic happened, I actually enjoyed it.
Wow.
Like, I said, okay, so now I can focus on playing my piano, or I can paint, and I can do the things I like to do. And do you think some of it is people having a lack of depth in their relationship with themselves as well?
Absolutely. 1,000%. Because another thing that the pandemic revealed to me, or at least a lot of us clinicians that are in the field, is that a lot of people are uncomfortable with themselves, right? So a lot of people you may see attach themselves to other people for various reasons, or they can't be alone. You'll hear that often. And the pandemic exposed that, and people were really struggling, being by themselves or living on their own or whatever the situation was. It definitely brought that to surface that a lot of people cannot be with themselves for a multitude of reasons, right? Whether it's because they self-hatred is a real thing, and it happens because, again, relationships, early relationships, like that developmental stage, like it can happen for a lot of things. But I think the pandemic absolutely exposed that a lot of people do not like themselves, or at least cannot be with themselves alone and need other people around. And that's sort of how they sort of navigate the world. And again, this isn't a bad, it's morally bad or morally good sort of thing, but it is important to call to attention that this is something that we're seeing and we're noticing and trending still.
That right there is 1,000% true. And I've always said that that is also because of a lack of personal development,
There it is.
a lack of self development, self exploration.
Yeah.
If you are getting to know yourself, and if you are developing your own skills, if you are at least seeing what you like and venturing out and being adventurous, and part of that is how you were raised, your parents, some of it is you and yourself, but your environment. Like, I went to a school in New Jersey that allowed us to play different instruments, that encouraged us to be in these different classes, whether it was concert, choir, band, jazz band, gospel choir, and they had all of these enrichment programs, right?
Mhm.
So I had an environment that also compelled me to
Yeah.
do those things. So it was available. So it allowed that part of me to come out. What about all of these youth and all of these people? I'm trying to get this light back on. I'm gonna have to fix that. This office and all of these people who don't have those opportunities. Like from what I understand, enrichment isn't offered as much anymore now.
It isn't. Right.
So then, even if you are creative, if you don't have an environment that provides an opportunity for you or a parent that is trying to push you to be creative, how do you explore and develop those skills?
Right. Later on in life as you're an adult.
If you have the time or unless you get caught up with your mundane job. So a lot of those things have to be done when you have the time, which is when you're younger, right? Just like I wouldn't have known I had leadership skills had I not been allowed to be in organizations that I enjoy being in,
Yeah.
where I was able to take the initiative and take action on different things I wanted to do. And me seeing that, oh, so me taking initiative is what makes me a leader. It
Yeah.
wasn't trying to lead people. It was like, oh, I got into a situation where I was doing things I wanted to do, and I was into it so much that I did want to take the initiative, which
Yeah.
made me be a leader in that thing.
Yeah, Nika B said free play is minimal or non-existent or it's no longer free, which I think is a big, big deal, right? You grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in Boston where all the programming was free, right? And like now that I'm here in Atlanta and like I feel like families got to pay for things, like for everything. And I'm just like, wow, well, that's going to impact the, number of youth who are going to be able to be exposed to these sort of things to build those skills, right? And essentially we call those coping skills, right? Like in the moment when things are rough, things are tough, what's in my toolbox? What coping skill can I lean on to kind of help myself, right? And unfortunately, if you don't develop that skill, if you don't develop sort of that healthy sort of pattern, if you will, you're going to lean more on maladaptive coping skills, right? So maladaptive might mean going online, creating that fake page and talking shit to everybody and being miserable online, right? That might be their belief. And unfortunately, again, we call it maladaptive because again, I don't want to put the connotation that is terrible, but I think it might be an indication that you need help.
That part, and you said it's so much that we could discuss on this topic, from the environment to personal development. I think touching upon this topic, it really is now opening and exposing how many tentacles there are to it, and that it's much more complex than just being lonely. And there
Oh,
are people out here that are thinking, oh, I'm lonely. Maybe I just need to go out to the club, or maybe I just need to know. It's an internal thing first, right?
mhm,
And we have to do the work internally and look internally. Why do I feel this way? You
mhm,
know, how can I deal with these feelings? What are the coping mechanisms that are in place? Do I enjoy being by myself? Do I know how to do things by myself? You
yeah,
know, I think one of the greatest things about growing up as an only child was I was forced to learn how to enjoy being alone.
enjoy your own
You
company.
know, I had to, my mother told me I would take a pair of keys and play with them for hours.
Just fixate.
But hey, it's like what you have, where your attention is, and being able to say, all right, I'm going to take this time and use it for something of good. I'm going to plan for a time when I do have people around me, or I'm going to explore this book that's been sitting on my shelf this whole time. But Nika says, I do crisis work, and the younger kids keep me employed. 90% of the time during my assessments, their struggles seem from rejection from real peer uh, from their peers, and then turn into platforms for friendships. And when that goes left, they struggle severely.
Yeah,
And when she asked the parents about community engagement and activities, they admit kids are not engaged in anything other than video games, phones, etc. They're no longer free.
yeah.
Play is a minimal or non-existent. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
That
No, I see it. And I wrote a children's book many years ago. Elijah Was Brave, because I was when I was in my clinical internship, I was interning at the Boys and Girls Club. and I would watch like these young boys and girls sort of interact with each other. I would see how they handle losses. They would totally decompensate, right? If they lost a game, it was just like a total meltdown. It was beyond sort of the normal range, if you will. And like I would just study these behaviors informally, right? This wasn't an official study, no IRB approvals or anything like that. But informally, I've just taken notes and observations so that I could develop a program. And so, really, the book was about like seeing some of these behaviors and how they kind of play out in sort of social settings and how we can intervene early on, right? I think, Nika B mentioned like these families are just like letting them play video games and just forget about them in a sense. No, we gotta sort of intervene, whether that means therapy, whether that means like coaching or whatever that means, right? Case management in the community, but we have to intervene because like those aren't normal responses. And then when we keep it unresolved or we keep it unaddressed, that's only going to follow them later on in life. They're not going to know how to necessarily handle situations when it comes on later in life, i.e., pandemic, which again, it was extremely difficult. I don't want to make light of that, but a lot of people struggled. And I think if we can teach skills early on, we can intervene.
Ooh, you said that. And Nika said, my mom had me playing with keys. Kids now are handed tablets.
That's it.
And that's the truth. No need for an imagination. Just plug into someone else's, and now the
That's
tablet is occupying you and you're not occupying it, right?
it.
So, how do we take solid steps back into that analog world where everyone's so dependent on the digital reality right now?
People really have to go outside and touch grass. Plain and simple. We got to get back outside. The weather is warming up generally across the country. We got to get back outside. We got to learn how to engage with people in person. I also think conversations like this to kind of like help people resonate and kind of see, okay, maybe this is where I was at. I was going down a spiral. Like, okay, maybe I should get some help. What does help look like, right? Does it mean I'm going to therapy? That's definitely always an option. Does it mean that I might need to work with a life coach to help on my social skills? Definitely an option. But I do think it first starts with getting outside. So like one of the things I force myself to do, even though I work from home, I go outside and go to the gym, right? Because I need to interact with people. I need to know I still got it. I just want to be around other people. You just got to get outside. I think that's the first place where we got to start.
I agree. Being outside puts you in an environment where you're no longer in your head by yourself in your regular, normal environment, and touch grass, fresh air, sun in your face.
Yeah.
All of those things are extremely beneficial for our psychological and physiological selves.
Yeah.
And most of us are stuck inside. And you're right, the weather is on its way, but Atlanta took a step back today with this weird, I don't know, I guess, yeah, there's something going across the country right now, and dumping snow in the Midwest. I know a friend and business partner of mine, he's in Kentucky. We were on a call today, and he said they got snow overnight.
That's crazy.
Yo.
Well, there was a tornado warning out by me this morning.
And you're in Cobb, Eric Gwinnett.
And Conyers.
Conyers?
Yeah.
Tornado warning?
I literally this morning on my security dashboard, it said tornado warning.
Yeah, they can keep that.
Well,
it is spring, so it's warm weather. It's time to get outside, and I'm ready to ride my bike. I ride my bike in the spring, or just when it's warmer outside. So I gotta get it. I gotta get some of that. So, what do you think, besides going into the grass? Some people, if they're sitting home right now, they're depressed. They don't want to see anyone. They don't want to go outside. What do you think is some baby steps that someone could take who's depressed to getting them out of that dark cloud to move forward?
Yeah. So the thing with depression is, and I say this as not just a licensed mental health therapist, but I say this as a human who has gone through a depressive episode and knows how heavy and burdening it can be. I think the most important thing is that, and things for other people to understand as well, people who may not be in those shoes, is that people will but when people are ready for change and acknowledge that there is a problem, they are more attuned or more willing to sort of accept support and help, right? Like, I think if you kind of hear this and you kind of saying, okay, this might be something that I'm struggling with, this sounds familiar, this sounds like my experience. I think the next step or course of action is to perhaps reach out to your primary care provider. And again, this may feel overwhelming. You feel like too much help. Okay, can you have a friend reach out to, like, maybe call out on threads asking for a list of therapists, and maybe I can start that way, right? And so, like, it really is about first acknowledging that there might be something going on for you, because people who are, when we think about stages of change, right, the likelihood of a person who is in acknowledgement versus like in denial to make that change is more likely, right? And so, like, if you hear this and you acknowledge that there's something's going on, the first thing that I'm going to encourage you to do is either speak to your primary care or reach out to a therapist. We're always online. I'm a therapist. That doesn't mean I'm going to help you, but I can point you to the right direction, right? And so then the next steps from there is just like, booking the appointment or the intake or the consult, whatever that looks like for that particular therapist. But I think if you acknowledge that something is going on with you, the next step is to speak to your medical provider or a mental health provider. And
Boom.
I think Nika kind of mentioned something, be okay with initial discomfort of going out and learning a hobby, and challenge the client to find activities that are free in community and just try it. Absolutely. I think, to Nika B's point, like, we have to, growth, challenging ourselves is where growth happens, right? That's where change happens. That's how we foster change. And this idea around what you're probably familiar with is neuroplasticity. When I was the most depressed person ever, and I was in treatment every week, my therapist said this. She was just like, I want you to do one new thing every single week by yourself. Right. And what that did was foster, not only did it help me create new neural pathways around, like, falling in love with myself, if you will, but it also helped me build trust for myself. It also helped me build this idea that I can do tough things. And, like, it just helps so many different facets of my life. And that's the idea around neuroplasticity. So we have to challenge ourselves. Part of therapy and part of doing this work is challenging ourselves. Nothing is going to be easy. And I think people need to understand that as well.
Yeah, that is the truth. There's nothing that we can do that's worthwhile in this world that's going to be easy, But the truth is, the more that we do it, that resistance to doing something when you start is what helps you develop the capacity to do it even greater.
That's it.
So without the resistance, without the challenge, there would be no progress. There would be no strengthening. And I made a post about that this morning. Going through life thinking there won't be any challenges is like going to the gym and not having any resistance.
Yeah.
You won't build any strength and you don't see results.
Exactly. That's what it is, right? What do you think people should be doing if they find themselves in a situation where they feel stuck or lonely, if you will?
If they feel stuck and they feel lonely, I would say the first thing that they need to do, if they can, talk to someone.
Yeah.
Anyone, anyone that they can trust. I know that's not always the case. Not everyone wants to tell someone, hey, I'm feeling crazy today. I don't feel like life is going too well for me. That can be a tough thing. Another thing they could potentially do is vent out through writing,
Yeah.
right? Journal. Open up a book, a piece of paper, and start writing how you're feeling. Write it out, okay? And after you've written out how you feel, then write out how you want to feel. And then write out what you need to do to change how you're feeling to get to that place that you want to be, right? These are little things you can do yourself, right? And like you said, find things that you're interested in. There has to be something you're interested in and do it.
Yeah.
Don't think about it. Get out your head, stop thinking, start doing, start moving. If you want to change your psychology, you have to change your physiology. So get up, exercise.
Exercise.
Right? Even if you don't go to the gym, do some squats, do some lunges, do some air squats, walk around the block, start going for a walk. We have to change our physiology by changing our psychology, or change our psychology by changing our physiology, meaning movement will change your mind.
Yeah.
It will take all of those cobwebs in your brain and everything negative you're thinking, and it will clear it out, and it will bring you present so that you're feeling good, your adrenaline is pumping, your oxytocin is pumping, And again, find a hobby or something you enjoy to do. Doesn't have to be huge, but something small
Yeah.
that you love to do. You know,
Um,
that's important to you and do it. You know, regardless of what that is, spend some time doing the things that make you feel better. Make more of an investment into yourself and into your own well-being. One step, one day, one thing at a time, one moment at a time. And don't put pressure on yourself. This is the last thing I'm gonna say about that. Be gentle with yourself. Be
yeah,
allowing and understanding of where you are, but have a resolve about finding a solution to whatever that thing is that you're feeling.
absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know,
From the neuroscientist perspective, right? That's really important. And this is how these sort of different spheres of learning kind of support this work together, and when we can come together and kind of help our clients.
yeah, and we're going to keep doing this. You'll see us back as much as we can on a weekly basis. Same bat time, same bat channel. That would be around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and then there'll be a number of other lives you'll find us. And then if you didn't catch the live recording, we will be reposting clips coming near you, whether it's IG, TikTok, or YouTube Shorts. And it's always a pleasure, Adim.
It's always a pleasure.
And I look forward to these conversations. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was helpful to you out there. And if you didn't know, this is Wealthy Being.
Take care, y'all.
Until next time. Oh, how do I turn it off? Hold up. Bye.
Hey, do I leave? No.
I think, hold up. Yeah. All right, I got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're done.